Hey everybody, and welcome back to the history of video gaming. My name is Wes, and I am here with Ben, and why don't you say who else is here, Ben?
Well, we've got a very special guest today, our good friend Chris. How you doing, Chris?
Hey guys, I think it's in the theme of the show to say I'm doing pretty good.
Doing pretty good, yeah. We're all doing pretty good.
Yeah, you know how it works.
Oh yeah.
Chris is a friend of ours from college and also dedicated podcast listener. So we thought it would only be appropriate to have him on here to help us take a look at some games.
Yeah, we got an extra, kind of long one today. I don't know. There's 6 games we could review. So I was like, this is the perfect time to get Chris in here to help out. But before we get into that, why don't we get into a little bit about Chris's mind, which is very scary.
It's a dark place.
Full of SpongeBob memes. What kind of stuff you been playing, Chris? What have you been up to?
So recently I have been just kind of getting a little bit into League of Legends, which I know Wes has been playing, I think kind of in the same time frame that I have, but probably a bit more of it. So we were playing a bit the other day and he's a little bit more advanced, I would say, but you know, we had a good time.
Oh yeah, that was real fun.
Yeah, and then otherwise, I've been playing with another friend of ours, this game Brawlhalla, which is like a free-to-play Super Smash Bros. Kind of imitation that is on Steam, and I think, Wes, you also said is on the Switch.
It is, yeah. It's free on the Switch, too, and it's cross-console as well, so I don't know if we might end up playing it on Steam together sometime, or maybe I'll hop on my Switch so I can be comfy on the couch while you guys have to sit and play it on your computers.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun game. It's kind of like a dumbed-down Smash Brothers, I think. There's not as much to do, and that works well for me because I was always just terrible and using down B in Super Smash Bros.
Right.
So it works better for me in that way. And then otherwise, just bought, in the Steam Winter Sale, just bought the Left 4 Dead pack.
Nice.
So haven't played that in probably 8 years. So it's been a lot of fun just firing that back up and going through the maps and the campaign again for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. And I was playing through it with you a little bit yesterday, and I just that game still holds up so well. Left 4 Dead 2, well, and the Left 4 Dead 1 maps that are in it, it's still fun.
Yeah, it was a blast, and definitely didn't feel like it was dated at all. It was still just like a legit zombie shooter.
Yeah, they did it right when they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, very cool.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we're going to be having you review some old games today. What is some old games that you remember that you played when you were younger, maybe? Are these games that I gave you, are they making you nostalgic about anything?
A little bit, in the sense that my youngest memories for gaming are with the Sega Genesis. So much more simplistic than anything I play kind of nowadays, right? So early on, kind of growing up, my dad had the Sega Genesis and he would play it a lot. And his big thing was the NHL hockey games.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So I have a lot of nostalgic memories about that game, and I actually still play it. I have it in my apartment, and I have NHL 95. So I'll play that, and I'll make Marissa play it, which she is always very unhappy to do. But it's much more simplistic. Like I was saying, it's you've got 3 buttons, and you have kind of a directional pad. Mm-hmm. And it's almost harder to explain than a newer game because you're that button does everything. Just keep pressing it.
Right, yeah. There's all the complex moves, they're all on that one button.
Right, just keep hitting C and you're good. So that's probably my earliest memory, as well with some other games we had on there. We had Sonic the Hedgehog, we had some Batman games. Mm-hmm. And then otherwise, I think kind of after that, the next stage for me was probably Pokemon. Heavily played Pokemon and kind of still did throughout high school and college, really, as the newer games came out. And then kind of transitioned into more of the Call of Duty, the Halo, the Gears of War, kind of online shooters. And then probably the heaviest amount of time I've ever put into a game is into Elder Scrolls, whether it's Oblivion or Skyrim.
Oh, yeah. You can sink so much time into that.
Can't go wrong there.
Yeah, definitely not.
All right, so did you have a lot of handhelds as a kid then? You said you played a lot of the Pokemon games, right?
Yeah, so first one I had would have been Game Boy Color.
Nice.
I had Pokemon Blue, my brother had Pokemon Red, which was nice to take advantage of classic Nintendo not allowing you to capture them all.
Right.
So it was good to have that kind of life hack. And then moved on to Game Boy Advance, had the Game Boy SP, I guess, at one point. And then I kind of stopped buying them with the, what is it? The DS, the Nintendo DS. Yeah. I had a newer DS so I could play the newer games as they came out, but nothing since then.
Then you get the pseudo handheld with the Switch, or handheld with the Switch now, which is weird because it's basically a home gaming console. But I always forget that you can pick it up and take it with you.
yeah. I always wonder if that gets much use. You know, they kind of push that in the marketing and the advertising, and I'm like, I've never seen somebody carrying their Switch around.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Really.
I've seen my students do it. Like they'll be waiting for their parents after lessons, and they'll just be there on the Switch.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just not hip and young anymore. That's the only problem.
I guess that's the unfortunate truth.
I actually I make most of my Mario Maker 2 levels undocked. I don't know. I just think it's a little easier than using the, what are those things called? The Joy-Cons?
Mm.
Yeah.
You can just push your fingers on it, you know?
Certainly a step up in handheld gaming from the last thing I did. I mean, now you're carrying around like a legit console in your hands.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I had another interesting question that I thought about when we're talking about nostalgic and gaming history as a kid. Do you have like a specific memory of like the game that you all went to a friend's house to play? If you have one. I know for me it was like Halo 2. We just would all like go over to each other's houses and all play Halo 2 together.
Yeah, do you mean in like the LAN sense, or like one guy had a game that everybody had to go play?
Well, I guess either way. Yeah.
I think Halo was a big one too. I mean, at Halo 2 and Halo 3 in high school, going to people's houses and playing that. But another one that popped into my head at first was, I remember one of the early Soul Calibur games, if you ever played those.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
A friend had one of those, and it was like a big thing. He was the only one who had it, so like every week we would go over his house, just take turns, you know, going through the campaign or whatever.
Nice.
What about you, Ben?
I'm not sure. I feel like most of my friends didn't have consoles that or games that like I was interested in. I was just like the kid that like by himself at home, and everybody else be out playing football, and I'd be like, I'm gonna play, you know, Farming Moon or whatever, you know, and try to get a second cow on this farm, you know.
Yeah.
That's like what I was doing.
I'm sure that's incredibly relatable for other people though as well.
Yeah. So, well, Chris, you've been listening, avid podcast listener. Thank you.
Of course.
What's like maybe one or two games that you're like really excited for us to cover? I know you mentioned Tony Hawk's Underground to me. I mean, that's a classic.
Yeah. So you just mean in the timeline what I'm looking forward to?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony Hawk series in general, I will be stoked when we get to the early 2000s and those start to come out. So, you know, I'll just be holding on for another couple of years.
Yeah.
But definitely we'll anticipate those. I think that series in general is a lot of fun to talk about and like very nostalgic for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And I always think it's interesting. People have different kind of frames of reference, I think, with that series as to like which game they're nostalgic about. So for me, it's Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 was my first one, right? But I'll talk to other people who had Pro Skater 3 first or had the Underground games first. So looking forward to Tony Hawk.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm probably looking forward to like getting into that 90s, like late 80s, early 90s era of like Genesis and Nintendo, you know, whether it's N64 or Super Nintendo or whatever. Just kind of the stuff that like you remember playing or seeing when you were much younger.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because this is all stuff that we like heard about but never really played except for like restored versions in the arcade or at the arcade or whatever. But once we get there, it's like, oh, we actually played all this stuff.
Yeah. Or at least, you know, saw it. Like I never had an N64, but I knew all the games.
Right.
Or occasionally played them. But no, I definitely agree. It's been interesting, I think, as a listener, hearing to the never-ending Pong saga.
Oh, God, yeah. And it still probably isn't over.
Yeah. Growing up, I remember my dad would always talk about Pong, right? Because like they had that when he was a kid. But I always just kind of was like, oh yeah, there was a game called Pong.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But really, there were about 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because when I first started doing the podcast research, like in my mind, it almost went like Pong, and then like the second game was like Breakout, and there was literally like 300 games in between. I'm like, how was there so many games? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Dune 93 should be coming any day now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's very cool, Chris. Thank you again for joining us. It's going to be awesome having you.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
We do have a lot to cover in the timeline, so I kind of want to just like hop in there.
Yeah, let's get straight into that.
right, and welcome back to this very special episode. We are going to start off with a very not special game, one that I hate even exists. This one's called Dukedom. I know. Well, it's a computer game, and you know why I hate it. It's because it's an expanded version of Kingdom, which in itself is an expanded version of Hammurabi, which, like, why do people keep making this game?
Hammurabi lives on forever.
I know. Like, what's going on, people?
You need to revisit that relevance score.
I'm not revisiting that game. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, Dukedom, it's by Vince Talbot, came out sometime in 76, but we don't know anymore, and I don't want to know anymore, so just leave it at that.
And so, Chris, if you want to take it away then with the first game that you got to cover this week.
Sure. Yeah, so the first game that I played is Indy 4, came out in 1976 by Key Games. I think the release date was May 17th. And this was a 4-player version of Indy 800. So this was kind of a classic like car on a racetrack racing game, but there was full color RGB display. So it wasn't an overlay, it was actually color display.
Oh, nice.
There was on-screen scoring, which I'll get into in a bit because I found the scoring in this game to be bizarre. Controlling via the keyboard was kind of weird. This would initially have been in a cabinet where you had steering wheel and a pedal. So keep in mind, with the racing game, it's kind of different on the keyboard. But the way the game would work is you would use your car first to go around the track in what I think was maybe a 1-minute time frame that you had to do kind of as many laps as you could. But what was kind of weird to me is that you didn't actually get scored based on completing a lap. There were kind of these point markers that you didn't know were there unless you kind of went through and figured out how you were getting points. But as you hit certain areas of the map, you would get points. And what was particularly weird to me was that you could start your car in either direction. So you would start facing left, and you could drive left and go around the course that way. But there was nothing stopping you from going in reverse, the other direction on the course. And at first, I thought you were supposed to go up, right? So you're supposed to go left, but I went up. And I was, playing for maybe 10 minutes, doing a few rounds, and I was getting scores that were like maybe 12 or 14 points. And then I was like, wait a minute, why does the car start facing the other direction? And apparently it's because you're supposed to go the other direction. So I started playing going the other direction, and I realized that my score was exponentially higher. I was suddenly hitting like 40 points. And I was like, how the hell does this game score me? Because it's not number of laps, and it doesn't seem to be like there's like set point markers. So in one of the YouTube videos that we had for this, I had a guy who was able to kind of explain that there are like set point values for each marker that you hit. And by going the correct direction, you would hit those point markers earlier, right? So you would hit the point marker that gave you 8 points much sooner than if you went backwards on the course. So I finally figured out how it worked at that point. But overall, it was kind of a classic, like just go around the course as quickly as you can, try not to crash.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let me get into a bit of, what my likes and dislikes were with the game. The idea was that there were 4 cars. You would get a specific color, and there were then 4 players who had that color, and you would each take turns going around the course. In the emulator, I never saw it kind of go to the next color car. After I finished my round, it would just kind of stop, and I could start over. But in reality, the next person would have gone.
Right.
I kind of liked that aspect of it. I could imagine having played this like in an arcade, and you're taking turns one at a time, kind of as I did like growing up with friends, where you had like a single player game or a multiplayer game, but you could like take turns seeing what your score would be. But what I'm kind of confused about, and I don't know if either of you have any insight on this, is it's like a 4-person cabinet. So could you all have been playing at once? Because it didn't seem like it in the emulator.
Yeah, I think so. There's four pedals.
Yeah,
4 steering wheels.
I would think in the original version, especially because it's called Indy 4, and we've seen a version of it before where I think 8 could play at once, right, Ben?
Yeah, 8 players on the same same track at the same time.
Yeah, so it was well within their ability, I'm pretty sure, to do 4 players playing at the same time.
Okay. So in the emulator, it would have just been all the other cars disappeared, right? So it was just my car on the track. So I couldn't really tell like what the interaction with other drivers would have been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that would have been interesting to me to see. Okay, so one gripe I had about the game is I watched kind of a clip from Grand Track 10, which is a predecessor to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that seemed more advanced in gameplay.
Oh, yeah.
There was power sliding on the turns, which maybe you could do in this, but I didn't have any idea how. And there were oil slicks on the track, which kind of added like an obstacle, which in this there weren't really any obstacles like that. But overall, I think this would have been pretty fun to compete against people. I gave the gameplay a 3 out of 10. I thought the scoring was very bizarre. Like I would have preferred if you just got like a point for every lap you were able to complete.
Right. Like a normal race.
Right. It took me a lot. Like I was just sitting here going, how am I getting points? Like I have no idea. The gameplay though, like controlling the car made sense. There was a decent sort of acceleration and turning mechanic to it. You had kind of the classic racing game mechanic of if you went off course, your car doesn't spin out like you would see in like a Mario Kart, but like you kind of had the same come to a slow halt and then like have to slowly pull out of it effect. So I kind of saw some of that, mechanic that you see in every racing game now. I gave the graphics a 2 out of 10. I thought the color display was nice. It was in that way more advanced than like Grand Track 10, which was just black and white. And it was cool to have your own car. I could see that kind of, giving you an affinity for like having an identity in the game, similar to like made me think if you go to mini golf with friends, everybody picks the color ball they want.
Right. Yeah.
You grow attached to I'm a blue ball, right? So that's how I kind of felt in the game here. But overall, there wasn't like too much exciting to look at on the screen. It was just kind of dots that outlined the course. And for relevance, I'm not really sure because it seemed to me like in a lot of ways this was less advanced than Grand Track 10, with the exception of the color display. Right. So I don't know how much came out of this game that would have been important to future racing games that wasn't in another game, right?
Right. I think it's like, it was really the color graphics, right? And then also having 4 players, because Grand Track 10 was just the 1, right? So I think that was like the 2. But it is interesting that they had the 8-player version, and it doesn't seem like there's any improvement over that one. It's like they just reduced the number of players to 4, and they're like, new game,
So was that in color, the 8-player?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Same maker and everything? Same developer?
Key Games.
That's really interesting. You almost wonder why bother at that point.
Maybe it was just like the 8-player version was really expensive to make, and they're like, hey, this is a cheaper version. It's only 4 players, but...
Probably more economical, like a smaller cabinet.
Yeah.
I thought...
The other one, it was like massive. It had this big like canopy looking thing, like to get everybody's attention, I think.
Okay.
And this one was definitely a little bit scaled back. It still had kind of a canopy looking thing, but...
That makes sense. I think one thing I kind of on that note mentioned, I thought it was pretty interesting reading the flyer for this, and I kind of saw it in the other flyers I looked at too, but I never looked at the flyers, obviously, just heard you guys talk about them. I was kind of very fascinated by the fact that they are a pitch not to the person who would be playing the game, but to like the owner of the bar or the arcade who would have been buying these games.
Yeah.
So they're being pitched on factors that would mean nothing to you or I playing it, right?
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting way to look back at it because, I mean, it makes sense because it's, like this couple $100 thing that they're basically saying like, this will make you money, so buy it. But it's just like looking at it as a gamer kind of consumer. It's just like a totally different feel when they're like easy to access, constant money earner.
Never in my review did I have the chance to reflect on the hinged cash doors.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But to get back to my review, I gave relevance a 3 out of 10 again because I think the color was good, but again, it was in previous games, and I don't know like what advancements they really made in gameplay here.
Right.
So I don't know that it really defined anything in this genre. And then overall, I said it was a 3 out of 10. I thought it would be fun enough to play against friends. One player I don't really think has a lot of staying power. Like I couldn't really imagine myself doing laps around the track for too long. There's only one track, right? And like, how many times can you do that?
Right.
But overall, 3 out of 10. I could see it being good in the arcade setting, and the color display was cool.
Did you skip like graphics and sound?
No, he did graphics right at the beginning, but
let me mention on sound. I elected to not do sound rating for any of the games I played because they didn't have sound in the emulators.
That's a fair
so
point.
I'll just do NA. I'll just do NA. I should have mentioned that. I didn't write it down, but NA on sound. I listened to sound for similar games to get an idea, and I actually kind of liked. I'm imagining it had similar, but the kind of like revving the engine sound and the car speeding up. I thought that the sounds were actually pretty nice for kind of the similar games that were out at this time. but I didn't give a rating since I couldn't really hear in Indy 4.
That's how very fair and accurate of you.
I try to be. This is the no spin zone.
Yeah, just like we invite you to the podcast, you give everything 10 out of 10. Like, what?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
He's going to totally throw up our credibility.
No, I don't think so. Well, I mean, sounds interesting. I mean, I wish I could have done something a little bit more. I feel like you took 4 cars off the racetrack and you really didn't add anything.
Right, you got to do something big to make up for that, I feel like.
Yeah, kind of weird. And like you were saying, Ben, I think it truly might have been, I mean, as I'm kind of looking at the flyer again, the things they're advertising are kind of things I would not notice in gameplay, right? Like it's calling out that there's a 25-inch color monitor, which again, like the color is just the cars. It's calling out optional dollar bill acceptor. So like I think maybe this was just like a cheaper, more effective game for them to sell than the previous, but I don't know.
Could very well be true.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool though. I hope you enjoyed it. First one that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. It was cool to play some of these older games rather than just kind of hearing about them.
Yeah, and you also got to see a little bit the evolution from Grand Track 10, which is kind of the one that started this whole sort of family of Grand Track, type games. So
definitely.
Very cool. All right, why don't we move on? Wes, I think you got the next one.
I do, yeah. So next up, we have an honorable mention. This one's called 21 by Micro, I think, or Mirko. And this is a blackjack type game, but there's not really much info on it. It came out in June of 76, and it looks like it might be related to Hit Me by Ramtech, but we don't know much more about it. And next up, I have a interesting one, which I always feel like that says something about it when I lead off with it being interesting. This one is one that I got to watch a couple videos on and review, and it's called Knights in Armor by our favorite, most well-known gaming company, Project Support Engineering.
No.
Who definitely sounds like a company that makes video games. But this came out in June of 1976, and just getting into the cabinet, it was oddly really plain. It had a nice design on the face of it. It was just like 2 medieval ladies cheering for a white knight and a black knight as they're jousting. But that's kind of it. And there was columns to set the stage a little bit, and I don't know. The whole side of the cabinet though was just kind of like this gray plastic and the wood veneer kind of stuff on the sides. The controls also looked really interesting. They were like this lever, kind of like I don't know, when someone's powering up a core in futuristic movies and it makes the noise when they do the Death Star laser, that kind of lever, if you know what I mean. And then that one made the shield go up and down for your knight. And another lever that was more like a joystick right next to it that helped you aim your lance. It's weird that there were 2 different shaped levers that you controlled at the same time for your character though. And one interesting feature, as we were just talking about with when Chris was doing Indy 4, is that this is marketed towards people who are buying it, and one of the big features that they listed right at the top here is that the screen displays stuck coin in big letters if a coin gets stuck in the coin entry thing.
Okay.
Which is good. That kind of says all you needed to say. They're like, hey, we finally figured this out. If a coin gets stuck, the screen tells you. But getting into the gameplay for this one, it's a 2-player game. You're basically automatically moving towards each other at opposite ends of the screen. They're kind of moving horizontally. The white knight is up at the top, and then the black knight is down at the bottom of the screen, and their jousts are sort of pointing at each other. And what you do in the game is you raise your shield and adjust the height, and also adjust your lance height to block the opponent's lance and hit the opponent at the same time as you're jousting. And just whoever scores the hit that round gets a set number of points, and you can joust for either 8, 10, or 12 rounds, depending on what the person who bought the cabinet sets it at. So one thing that made this kind of weird is I'm not sure how many lance positions and shield positions there were. The shield, it looks like it might have just been either up or down, but the lance looked like it had a whole range of 4 or 3 heights. And that would have made it a lot more interesting. So I'm not too sure exactly how that worked, because it also looked like you could end some jousting rounds in a stalemate, and that might have been a different type of score than if you actually hit the other player. it was all kind of confusing. I should say that it was a like 20-second video that we had for this, and that's basically all we have for it. So didn't get too much info on how the game actually plays. But so getting into the ratings for it, for graphics, I just gave it a 1.5 out of 10. The background is like totally blank. There's a green overlay for it and a nice score displayed at the top. The main redeeming factor for this one is that the knights do look pretty good. You can like tell they have a helmet with like a little feathery kind of thing on top. There's just a thin, long stick for a lance, which is a little simple but gets the point across, and also a shield that you can definitely tell is a shield. And the horses do look pretty good. They just have 2 different sprites for either like legs out or all the legs under them, so it looks like they're running across the screen. And they do even have a little small outline on them to show a saddle, but it just kind of feels like something that's a little older than 76 when I'm looking at the graphics for this. I do want to say, though, that without color graphics, they did do smart use of, like, the Black Knight in armor has a white horse and the White Knight has a black horse, just so there's actual contrast there and you can tell what's going on. But the way that it's represented on the screen with, like, they're traveling horizontally, but they're vertically above each other, it's, like, really hard to figure out where you're aiming and what height you're blocking. Because they're just going in straight lines, even though they're above each other, but your lance and shields are, like, at angles. And just visually, it's like really kind of muddled and confusing about like what you're aiming at, or at least to me when I was watching through this. So even though there was pretty good detail for the knights, the whole rest of the screen is just kind of nothing. There's no like fence or anything that I could see, like dividing line that these guys are riding up against. So it's all right graphics, but not great. And in the same vein as the game that Chris just reviewed, for sound, I gave it an NA. I couldn't find a video with sound for the game, so I can't really say anything about it. But moving on to the gameplay for this, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. I think it's a really novel type of game. I mean, I don't think we've seen like the Knights kind of theme before in any of the games that we've played.
Definitely not.
Everything's kind of been like, video games are futuristic, let's do futuristic stuff. But it's really cool. Well, other than, I guess, some of the RPGs that we played. But for an arcade cabinet, like the jousting theme is something that we really haven't seen, and it is pretty awesome. But it just doesn't look like it's that fun, if that's not too mean to say. It looks like no elements change throughout the game. Like, I kind of wish there were like 5 rounds in, something changes, or I don't know, something like that.
Maybe like a Knight's Tale where your opponent tries to kill you during the match.
Right, yeah, exactly. Give you a little bit more risk so that you actually you need to joust them back. And I do want to say, I forgot to mention in the graphics, but the animations for the knights getting knocked off the horse are pretty good. Like, when you hit the White Knight, it just looks like he got like stabbed through the chest. And his horse keeps going, and the knight just travels with you on the other side of the screen at the end of your lance.
Oh, cool.
And when you hit the Black Knight, he's just like, looks like he fell off the back of his horse, but his ankles are stuck in the saddle. So he just gets dragged along behind his horse. So that is pretty good, and they did a good job with making that look interesting. But I do think that with the gameplay, it's one of those ones where playing it by yourself, it probably wouldn't be great. But if you were really getting competitive with a friend on it, I think it'd be pretty fun. But just overall, it just seems really simple. You know, you charge at each other, you either hit or you don't hit, and then you start over. And you just keep going for like 8 rounds, 10 rounds, or however many rounds until you have the most points. So for relevance for this, I just gave it a 3 out of 10. The game is from a company we don't really know much about, and it's with a genre that we don't really see anymore, at least when you're talking about something as specified as jousting. So I don't know how much it would have really impacted things in the history of video games or in the rest of this timeline, but I do think it's really cool that this is like the first of its kind, like specifically a jousting game, focusing on knights, and like everything else that we're seeing now is kind of like space games or war games or modern day kind of stuff. So even though I don't think it's super influential, I think it is a really cool addition to just sort of like looking at it in the historical context of where it is in this timeline.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the fact that there's no games in this genre, which you kind of mentioned anymore, which is kind of weird that there's like not even like an arcade type of thing that's based around jousting. I feel like it's like everybody is kind of interested in it, right? It's just kind of a cool thing in like Game of Thrones or Knight's Tale.
Right, and it makes me feel like it's doesn't translate well to gaming, or just the ones that, I mean, there could be an arcade game out of this now that just like isn't super popular or something. But the only really like modern day jousting I could think of is in games like Mount and Blade and stuff, where it's like 3D space, which you don't really need for jousting, I guess, because it is like you're just going right along the fence.
Sure.
But yeah, it seems like something identifiable, right? Like, oh yeah, jousting, that's cool. But
yeah,
no jousting games. Where'd they go?
We'd be remiss not to mention the influence on genital jousting, though.
That's true. So there is a jousting game that is very different, but maybe 10 out of 10 relevance, because Knights in Armor directly influenced genital jousting. You heard it here first.
All right.
And so moving on to my overall rating for this, gave it just a 1.5 out of 10. I think it's a really cool concept, and they do some pretty cool things with graphics, but I just can't think of any other games that took a shot at replicating jousting in 2D space. So, it is really cool in that sense. But the gameplay just doesn't look super interesting. And other than the knights and horses, I don't think there's enough like extra visual appeal compared to what's going on in other stuff that's going on in 76 to keep me like interested in playing. So I do want to say it's really cool to see a medieval themed game, but I don't know. I just don't know if it does enough despite being unique to keep me very interested in this game.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like a mini game that you would see today, but that's like the whole thing, Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's cool, but it's not like enough compared to some of the stuff that we're seeing in 76 now.
Too bad about the cabinet, because if it was a cool looking cabinet, like I would totally pick it up just because it's like weird, weird jousting game.
Right. Yeah, the art on the face is pretty good, but like you should have made the sides fit into like a castle turret. Go like ridiculous with it, like the man-eater cabinet.
Yeah, that would have been cool. All right. Nice, Wes. Let's keep it moving because we got a lot to do today. So this next one is another honorable mention called Chase. Oh, but I've also seen it called Chase 1, I think because it's a one-player game. But this is by Allied Leisure, came out sometime in 76, and I think it was like a first-person airplane fighting game. It was kind of like you just controlled the crosshairs. I guess kind of similar to Interceptor. But
right.
We don't really have a lot of info on it. Could have been electromechanical like Interceptor kind of was. So my guess is it's kind of like a rip-off from that.
And another honorable mention we have from 76 is Crashing Race from Taito, which we think came out either June or July of 76. And it was just a clone of Demolition Derby by XD/ I believe a favorite of the pod, Chicago Coin.
Oh yeah. We love those Chicago Coin games.
Mm-hmm.
RIP Chicago Coin, by the way.
RIP.
Oh yeah, that's right. Whoops.
I believe when the pod finally launches merch, there should be a Chicago Coin themed shirt included in there.
I'm done with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It could be a hand reaching out of a grave that's holding a coin in it, and it says "RIP Chicago Coin" on the gravestone.
Yeah. I would wear that.
Let's make it happen.
There we go.
All right, and that'll move me into my first game that I'm going to rate. This one's called Cannonball by Atari, and it's kind of like a prototype game. We only really know about it because the person who made it is named Owen Rubin, and he has a blog now, and he was worked for Atari for I don't know how many years, a long time, and he has this blog, and he was kind of talking about his career, and he's like, yeah, I made this game, and everyone's like, no one knows what you're talking about. He's like, yeah, it probably wasn't released, but he kind of gave some supporting docs, and you can play it today. So I wanted to give it at least a little bit of a rating, even though it is a prototype. But essentially what this game is, all it is there's a cannon in the middle of the screen, and there's a little dude that walks up to it. I think you hold a button down for your cannon's shooting angle or strength or something. And then once you lift up your button, he jumps in the cannon, and then the cannon fires him out, and he either makes it through a little hole in a wall or he splats into the wall. And that's the entire game. There is on-screen scoring, both for successes and failures, and I think the game's over after 3 failures. but that's kind of it. And it's kind of funny because reading his like blog, he's like, yeah, this took me like 6 months to do. But he did work on it by himself, which is cool. I think the main thing about it is really the graphics, not because of the cannon and like that part, because it's kind of static, but the actual dude that you're firing is animated like really well. He like kind of runs up to the cannon, he kind of jumps in. When he's like in the cannon, you just see like what can only be described as like a silhouette of someone like kind of laying down like in a cannon. I don't know, it's like really well done. And then he pops out kind of like Superman style or something like that, and if he hits the wall, his body like compresses and he really splats into it, and he'll slowly like kind of fall down the wall, and then I forget what he does, but he looks like really depressed and he like goes over the cannon again.
Like, so he like slides down the wall?
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And if he is successful and he goes through the hole, he kind of comes out the opposite side and he's like all happy and he's like jumping and stuff. Like the animation of this dude is like really good. Really good. So I mean, I don't know if like Open Ruben, like I don't know if he was like a graphics guy, but compared to the actual gameplay, like that's where it was successful.
Right. Yeah.
So let's get into the ratings, because there's not much more to this game other than that. The hole on the wall surprisingly does not move at all between shots. It's the same one. So you're literally trying to get to the same strength of the cannon every shot, which doesn't make any sense.
Right. So you figure it out and you're like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to use. The emulator I was using, the graphics were kind of messed up a little bit, so I couldn't really tell how strong I was going, but I imagine if this game came out, they would have to try to make the hole in the wall move. Otherwise, there's like no gameplay.
Right.
But yeah. So let's get into gameplay. I just gave it 1.5 out of 10. I mean, you're firing the same guy in the same hole over and over again, and that's it. So yeah, 1.5 out of 10's that's the best I can do. For graphics, I mean, it's black and white, but we've got this really, really good animation of the dude being fired. So I kind of wanted to give it high because of that, but then I kind of like took it down again because the entire game is only happening on like the bottom right hand side of the screen. Like the cannon is in the very bottom middle, so everything to the left of it is just blank. And then he fires to the right where there's a wall. So it's like they only use like half the screen. So you do have on-screen scoring and some text and stuff to like help it not look so dead, but it's pretty dead looking. So I don't know, I gave it 3.5 out of 10. That's just because the animation was just so good, and it really, really was good. But yeah, they could have done some other things. I think there. For sound, now in Owen's blog he says that there was sound and he made like a splat sound, but in the emulator there was no sound and I couldn't find any videos of there being sound, so I just had to NA that, which kind of sucks because apparently he put in like a splat sound, which would have been pretty cool to hear. But so NA for sound. And for relevance, I gave it 4 out of 10. I kind of like went back and forth with this because it wasn't released, so how can it be that relevant? But it was this guy's first game, and he did go on to work on other like notable Atari video games at Atari, so it's like, okay, you know, this was this guy's first chance and they must have liked it. So I gave it 4 out of 10, a little bit less than like average in my mind. So I don't know, it was an interesting one. I just like, it definitely felt like a half finished game.
Right, yeah.
So overall, I just gave it 2.25 out of 10.
Oh, getting very granular with those quarters.
Yeah. I'm handing them out.
Nobody told me we could get that far into the fractions.
You can do whatever you want, Chris. You can give it a pi out of 10 if you want.
Don't give him that liberty. He's going to give a pi out of 10 next time.
Yeah, so Cannonball, it kind of prototype, but I think it has potential. I mean, if this guy was like, I don't know exactly what his role was with these other games, but he has like some talent in animation, and that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the real. I mean, like, he poured all of what he did into that part of it, or at least it sounds like, because that's so much more than we've seen in most of the other games that we have in 76.
Yeah, I just wish like the cannon wasn't animated at all. Like changing angles or whatever, you didn't really know that much. But the guy himself was very animated. He had like personality, which is really cool. Really cool to see.
It's that contrast though that kind of makes you realize like, oh, everything else kind of sucks.
Yeah, and the fact that the whole left side of the screen is just black, it's like, okay, maybe we should have done something over here.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. If it was fully released, I think it probably would have had, it would have had sound. It would have maybe, the whole would have obviously changed. Maybe the cannon placement might have changed. Maybe it moves to the left or something. That could have been really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it still is just you're shooting a guy out of a cannon going into a hole, kind of almost mathy in a way, although not using numbers. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much that's going to be interesting, but it's unique enough to make me interested in it. So yeah, Cannonball.
Cool. Well, let's move on then to our next honorable mention. This one's called Skywar by Mirko. I said Micro the first time, but I think it is Mirko. And this came out in June of 76, and it's an airplane fighting game similar to Atari's Jet Fighter. But other than that, we don't have much info on it.
Yep. And so after that, we have another honorable mention here. This one and the next one are both conversion kits, meaning that you kind of take your current game of Hit Me or something, I'm not sure, and you can add a couple pieces to it and it becomes a slightly new game. This one's called Ace High by Ventureline Incorporated, and we don't really know if it actually came out because we only have a flyer, like a single flyer. So I am kind of skeptical, but it's a conversion kit. It seems like it made a simplified version of Texas Hold'em, which if you're already playing blackjack or something, I kind of see it being available. I don't know, or if you were playing solitaire, I don't know, but it just like allowed an existing cabinet to be, now it can play Texas Hold'em based upon, I guess, whatever cabinet it used to be. Maybe it was only available to certain other games that it could be applicable to. So I'm not totally sure. This whole thing is like kind of sketch. So just.
Then our next honorable mention is Casino and Casino Royale from VentureLink Incorporated. Similarly to Ace High, a key note for this is that it might not be real. And that's one of my favorite features in the game. We only have the flyer again from 76, and it was also a conversion kit. Played blackjack with simple graphical display of cards, 1 to 4 players. And the Royale version was, we believe, only available for the larger cabinets.
Seemed fair enough. And that's going to move us on to another honorable mention here. This time a console by the Odyssey kind of group here, the Magnavox guys, which whenever they do something, I'm like, oh, this could be good. This could be really good. This one is not that, though. This one kind of sucks a lot. I don't really know why either. Just like a little bit of background. They had the Odyssey 200, which was an upgrade from the 100. And then they had the 300, which was just like a version of the AY83800 chip. So it wasn't really their tech, so they kind of came out with that just to cash in a little bit. And then the 400 comes out. This is like the continuation of the 200 and that tech, like their own stuff. And wow, compared to the AY38500 chip, they should have just like not even tried, because there's something that's wrong about this game. It just looks wrong. You don't have those like nice clean boundaries. It looks fuzzy. It looks like the physics are kind of off. It does have on-screen scoring between points, but we've seen that already. It has a W for a win screen. I don't know why that's there, but I guess it's nice. It had some sound, and it also had this weird lagging paddles. I think we've seen them before, but if you could do like kind of a doubles version of Pong, but it's still one person per each side, and then the second paddle would kind of just follow your first paddle, but it would lag behind a little bit.
Yeah,
kind of like it was on ice or something.
Yeah,
I think we've seen that too. Maybe even the 200 had that, but I think the main improvement of this was the on-screen scoring and maybe the sound. But as far as the games, it's not really that interesting. You've got tennis, which is your Odyssey style tennis. You've got hockey, which is the same thing but with smaller goals, and you've got Smash, which this one I think might be new or slightly different, but it's a 2-player game where both players take turns hitting the ball against the left side of the wall. If like you just hit it and then the ball comes back, you cannot hit it again. It'll actually go right through your paddle, which is kind of nice. But it's black and white, and I'm not sure if the paddles are on the same plane or not, but if they are, that would be really bad.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like they might be there, but even so, it's kind of hard to distinguish between the players as is, because it is black and white and the paddles look exactly the same. So yeah, I didn't feel the need to like give this a rating. We got other games that were more interesting this week, and yeah, compared to like Super Pong, like you played, Wes, like I don't think it's even close.
Right.
But
yeah, Odyssey's trying. I mean, one of these days maybe we'll get another Odyssey one where we're like, oh, that's why we love these Magnavox folks. But
yeah, just looking at the Odyssey 200 quick, it didn't have the lag behind paddles, and it didn't have numerical scorekeeping. So I think that's really what they tried to implement in this one, but it's just kind of a shame. I feel like by now those things should be in there by default, and it's not like extra points because they're in there. It's like, no, you get the same points, and the rest of these games kind of suck. So
they are sort of taking the hard route by doing their own thing instead of just using the AY3 8500 chip.
Yeah,
but
I will say, to give us some hope, the next version of this console, I don't know if they use a chip or not, but it definitely looks a lot better than this one. So this one's kind of like the lame duck in the evolution of these games, I think. Just because the 300, I think, looks a lot better than this. And it had all this stuff in it. It had on-screen scoring. It didn't have a two-paddle lagging thing, and it wasn't Odyssey style, but I kind of don't like the Odyssey style anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. That was Odyssey 400. Came out sometime in 76.
All right. Well, then let's get on to the next game that I got to take a look at. Another one I couldn't play, but I did get to watch a pretty in-depth video about this one. And this is Cobra Gunship by our darling company, Meadows Games.
Oh, yeah.
And this came out in 76. And basically this seems to either be a copy or interpretation, or at least it has a lot in common with Interceptor by Taito, which Ben covered earlier. And so starting out with the cabinet, it's pretty cool. It's got like Cobra Gunship going along the side of it with like nice colored outlines and lines behind it. And at the bottom of the cabinet on the side, it has a tank exploding like in the crosshairs, which is always a nice touch. And the face of the cabinet itself actually has a bunch of fake gauge clusters, or a fake gauge cluster under the screen. So it really looks like you're jumping into a helicopter cockpit for this, or inside the, I guess you are driving the helicopter in this game, although it's always a little bit hard to tell. So, and also it has one of those, like dual handle realistic aircraft flight sticks for the controls for this. It was a little hard to tell from the images, but I'm pretty sure the fire button would have been on one of the handles, like on the thumb button, like it would be on an actual aircraft. But again, it was a little hard to tell, but that was the main control for this. So the gameplay, you're in the cockpit view of a helicopter, and basically you just have to shoot as many targets as you can. I couldn't really tell if there was a time limit or if you had lives, or maybe there was both, because you can die in this, which I'm not sure. I think that was part of Interceptor as well.
No, you couldn't. You didn't even get shot at. No.
Yeah, and it was a little hard to tell, but there's parts of this game where in big letters in the center of the screen it would say crash. So I'm pretty sure that means that you could die in this, and then the screen would kind of reset back to normal. So whether or not that actually took to any lives, or if it was just, you respawn and you have to start over again and get as many kills as you can in the time limit, I'm not too sure. But one of the really nice things that this had going for it was that there were a lot of different types of targets. Again, I'm not too sure if they were worth varying amounts of points. I would guess that they might be. But for ground targets, there were tanks and jeeps. And then for air targets, there were different types of helicopters and planes that you could shoot down.
Nice.
Yeah. So it gave you a lot of variety there. And it seems like you could crash into the ground, like I mentioned, and maybe even other targets. And it looks like the screen just kind of rebalances you on the horizon line, which is another really nice feature of this, when you crash, and then you just kind of keep going. So the horizon on the screen, which is one of the really cool points of this, changes based on how you aim and move, and pretty much like you would expect from like a lot of early flight sims that I've played, like the Microsoft flight sims or anything like that. It's a horizontal line. If you tilt left, it tilts to match that, and same if you go up and down. And it gives you the option of hitting ground targets below the horizon line or air targets above them, which is really nice. And it does also look like this had a 2-player mode, but as far as I could tell, there was only one controller on the actual cabinet, so it looks like it was more just a take turns and see who gets the highest score kind of 2-player mode. So getting straight into the ratings for this, for graphics, I gave it a 3 out of 10. There weren't any colors other than the blue overlay on it, and also the similar to Interceptor, it had a gray overlay for the sides of the cockpit and a little reticle overlay in the center. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on in this. It has like a crazy amount of sprites for anything that we've seen. There's 2 different land targets and at least 4 different air targets because there were 2 different types of planes and 2 different types of helicopters. And all of them also have a different sprite for when you get closer to them and it looks like they're more zoomed in. So it's like a slightly more detailed version of every single one of those. So just off the bat, that's like 12 different sprites that you can aim at, which seems like a lot for something in 76.
Yeah.
And also keeping in mind that while you're doing all this, the horizon line is tilting and moving up and down depending on where you aim. And in addition to that, the scores are clearly displayed at the top of the screen. There's a little explosion in the word crash in the center of the screen if you hit the ground. And if that wasn't impressive enough, there also is a pretty decent explosion sprite every time you blow something up. So even though the background is boring and it's just kind of like blue and then everything on the screen is white, I feel like it deserves a really high rating for graphics just because of the sheer amount of stuff going on the screen. So now getting into the sound, I gave it a 2 out of 10. The sounds can get a little annoying because they're like pretty constant. There's just like always an engine sound, and if you're holding down the fire button, there's always a machine gun sound going on. But I think they do a really good job of making you feel like you're flying a aircraft. It sounds like an airplane, but I'm pretty sure you're in a helicopter in this. But either way, I mean, like it gets the theme across. So there is a constant drone going on for the engine, and then periodic kind of like bullet buzzing noises for the guns. And there's also an additional engine sound, which is really nice, that increases in pitch as you point further under the horizon. So it really sounds like you're like careening down towards the ground whenever you look down far enough. And then that noise slowly starts to die off as you level out and look back towards the horizon. So it's a really good way to, with the sound, give the context that you're heading towards the ground, because there's no real solid ground in this. It's just below the horizon or above the horizon. Mm-hmm. But I thought that was pretty good that they're able to kind of contextualize that just with the sounds that they add in. For gameplay, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. Really, the gameplay isn't that much different than Interceptor, but I think just some of the simple additions that they make of like more targets or more different looking targets and types of targets, a horizon line, and just the possibility of hitting the ground really make it more fun. I could see it getting old. I mean, like after a while you are just kind of flying into infinity, shooting the same targets over and over again. But it really looks like a fun time, and like there's the risk of crashing, there's different targets you can focus on, and there's a lot of different ways that you could try to play this game to make it more interesting. And especially with the high score playing against a friend mode, you could get pretty competitive, make up your own modes, say like, oh, let's just kill jeeps, just tanks, or as many targets as you can. So I think that there's a lot to be done here and a lot of fun to be had with it, even though on the surface it is a pretty simple concept and a pretty simple game. And so for the relevance of it, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Although Meadows kind of was just like, hey, Taito made this game, it's cool, let's take it. I couldn't find anything to see if it was a licensed version, but I feel like it probably wasn't. I think they made some really good improvements on gameplay despite that, and I feel like it's got to be like on par with the most sprites that we've seen on screen so far, if not even like the most, because there could also be like, I want to say 3 or 4 targets on the screen at the same time. It might have been a little less than that, but just the amount of stuff that this had to have stored in it for a game in 76 is really impressive.
Yeah. And
also just that there are going to be Cobra Gunship games popping up in the future too. And they're not really, as far as I can tell, based on this game, because there is a helicopter called the Cobra Gunship, so they're probably just based on that. But I feel like this game had to have played at least some role in making like being in the cockpit of a helicopter a popular setting for video games. So I think it's pretty relevant in that sense and kind of does a good job at helping to establish what Interceptor started with, like that in-cockpit kind of a game where you're shooting down all those targets while you're flying around. And so overall, I gave it a 3 out of 10. I just feel like it's super solid arcade game. Like, everything about it's pretty darn good. The graphics are really good. The cabinet itself is really cool, and it's like one of those ones where it's just obscure enough that I feel like it'd be an awesome collection piece. If I'm sure they're incredibly rare, but if you ever got the chance to have one. And it seems like there's really a lot going on for what it was in 76, and you could really have a lot of fun with it.
Nice. I mean, it kind of reminds me of, we've played a couple like really old Cyber 1 sort of flying games in first person, and every time we play them, I'm like, it's probably like should be something like this one. Like, I feel like it simplified the actual flying mechanics to the point where it's like you could just enjoy it, you know?
Yeah. And since I didn't get a chance to play it, and of course we can't play it on the original machine, I have no idea how easy to control it was, but it just looks like it kind of made sense, like compared to some of the other ones we played where there's just like no context for where you are or what's going on. I was watching the video on Interceptor, and it kind of looks like disorienting, that no matter where you move, you're looking at clouds and planes, and like there's got to be ground somewhere. So I think this does a good job, even though it's kind of simple with how they do the horizon line in differentiating that. Yeah.
Well, I just am reminded of like Air Ace. I think I played that one, or I forget if you played any of these, but like some of the old Plato ones, you had like rudder pedals and stuff, and like all these, like it was like 15 different commands to get the airplane off the ground.
Right.
And this one is like, okay, we're here, you know, there's people around me.
Yeah, you're automatically flying, just tilt. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. So that's cool. And all the sprites and stuff, I didn't even realize that before I gave it to you. That's super cool.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot going on in that aspect.
All right, cool.
So yeah, that's Cobra Gunship.
I'm glad you got to play, because I know you like your flying games, and I am not a good flying game person, so any chance I can give it to you, it's like cool. And hopefully you know a little bit about more about Interceptor now too, which I did. Was that last episode or 2?
I think it might have been 2 episodes ago that you did that one.
Yeah, like 2 episodes ago. 2, 3, I don't know. We get these confused.
Yeah, 4, something like that.
All right, let's move on to my last one that I rated. This one's called Cops and Robbers, another Atari one. I'm like doubling up on the Atari today.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, I feel like I've been doing quite a few Ataris, and they've always been like very solid. And this one's no exception, I don't think. So basically what this game is kind of like, imagine like something like Western Gun, right? Where you got sort of a player on both sides. In this case, it goes up to 4 players. So you can have 2 people on either side, except they're in cars. And the cars have like a little gun model sticking out the side, which is pretty fun. It's cops on one side, robbers on the other. Their car models look slightly different. And there's like a scrolling graphics element at play as well, where it looks like you're on a road that the road is slowly kind of moving under you. And if you don't hit acceleration, your car will kind of fall behind and go towards the bottom of the screen. And then if you accelerate, it'll kind of like boost up towards the top. So you've got this scrolling graphics type movement. You can only move vertically. There's no horizontal. But it is pretty interesting and cool that you've got this sort of shooting game mixed with a scrolling graphics type game, you know, racing kind of game. But instead of racing, you're just dodging bullets and stuff. You can also shoot 2 bullets at a time, so that's pretty cool. So at any one time, there could be 8 bullets on the screen, and your car is pretty big, so it's like pretty likely that you're going to get a shot. You also have, similar again to Western Gun, in the very middle of the screen is like a third sort of street, or maybe an in-between or something, and there's like a little barrel track that will slowly move up through the screen and disappear and come back again. I think you can have maybe even 2 or 3 on the screen at one time, but they're just there for barriers. So you also have that. And on top of all this, you've got an overlay where the cops are kind of like a purpley blue color, the robbers are like an orange, and then the barrel trucks and stuff are all yellow, which is like pretty cool.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot going on here already. Like, I don't know. It's a very interesting one to me, and one that I quite enjoyed, honestly. So let's get into the ratings. Let's start with gameplay. I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's very solid, but I think there's a slight problem in that you can have 8 bullets on the screen, and your car model's like pretty big. So I feel like you constantly get hit, and you also constantly hit another car, even if you weren't really aiming for them. Like, you just fire 2 bullets off, and weirdly enough, the bullets can ricochet off the top and bottom of the screen, I think, or at least the bottom. So you can just kind of like aim down, like fire a couple times, and probably hit somebody. So that's kind of cool, but also kind of annoying if you keep getting hit. They did have a 1-player mode, which is pretty cool. And the 1-player mode, it was you versus 2 AIs. So I don't know really how that gameplay, sort of the mismatch impacted things, because on one hand you're a lot more likely to hit an opposing car, but then you're also a lot more likely to get hit because there's more bullets coming at you. So I don't know, I thought it was kind of fair, but I felt like I died a lot when I was playing.
Right.
So I think there's some balancing issues with the game, but it was still a fun time. You can by the way, aim with your gun that's shooting out the side of the window or whatever. You can kind of, I think there's like 5 different positions maybe between like almost straight up, straight horizontal and straight down. So it had all that. The graphics were pretty cool as well. I mean, you had scrolling graphics, which just right then and there, I'm like, I'm sold.
Right.
Because scrolling graphics just make everything feel like alive, and that there's actually things happening. So I was like, that's awesome. And then having the cars move in like individually, and having the AIs move individually, like that was cool. The barrel trucks were cool. The streets look like streets, although different colors because of the overlay.
Right.
But it was fine. And the barrel trucks, I think they even said like barrel on them or something. It looked they tried to make it look good. The cars themselves do look kind of weird. They're like weirdly box shaped, like they don't look right, but the cop one actually says cops on it, which is pretty cool. And I think the robber one, it looks different, but I think it's just kind of like a normal robber car, I guess. I don't know. But I gave graphics...
Classic robber car.
Yeah.
Right.
I gave graphics 3.5 out of 10. It's very solid. I think most of that is the scrolling graphics and the fact that you did have a color overlay. I know it's not like true color, but it helps. It makes it not black and white, and that actually helps quite a bit. So yeah, I thought that was nice. For sound, I gave it 1.5 out of 10. You had a rev engine noise, and you had a decent crash noise, but you did not have any shooting noises, which I thought was really weird.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, that could have just been in the emulator or something, but I couldn't find any like evidence that there was shooting noises, so I just included that. So I feel like that's kind of a big overstep or misstep on their part, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not missing it that much, honestly. You do have crashing noises, you do have that revving of the engine, so you're always hearing something at any time, which is nice. And then for relevance, I went kind of high again here. I went 7 out of 10. This is just because, like, I feel like anything with scrolling graphics, I'm like, okay, it's got to be kind of up there. But This is like scrolling graphics and cars and shooting at the same time, and cops versus robbers, which that whole theme, like, I was just thinking like GTA 5 like the whole time I was playing.
Right.
And to have it in 76, I mean, it seems like we've not played any game that has this sort of theme to it. Even the, sort of Western gun cowboys, like, I don't know if there was like a good cowboy and a bad one, but I think you could have a lot of fun pretending to be a robber or a cop and enjoy shooting the other guy.
Yeah. And a lot of what we've seen, they're only able to like establish the theming of it based on the art on the cabinet. Like if you're thinking of what was it called, Street Burners, like that sort of gives like traffic cops or whatever, but that's just like a demolition derby thing. Whereas this is like in the game, you can see, okay, that's a cop, that's a robber, we're shooting each other. All this mashup of stuff that's been like isolated games before.
Yeah, exactly. I should say, by the way, the cabinet, a little disappointing. It's kind of like pinstripey, kind of racing. Atari, like, I don't think ever really goes all out with their artwork.
No,
but, It's passable, but the gameplay itself is pretty fun. And having 1 to 4 players, you can play. I think playing 1 player is pretty fun against the 2 cars. Obviously, playing with more people is always fun. So I think it's actually a pretty well-rounded type of game where the gameplay is good, the graphics are good, the sound's a little lacking, but there's a lot of interesting elements here, especially coupled with the scrolling graphics and just how your car kind of like decelerates and goes towards the bottom of the screen if you don't hit anything, and then if you want to accelerate it, it kind of goes up again. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of games that will steal stuff from this game. So yeah, I thought it was pretty decent. Shooting bullet hell type game. Came out in July of 76. So I think, Cannonball I didn't have a date for. I was about to say, wow, like Atari did like 2 in 1 month, but
right. No, yeah, well, and Cannonball wasn't released, so that one's a mystery in itself. But
yeah, actually, our next game is Atari 2. So, and that one is July. So there is 2 games in July. But yeah, I think it goes to show that they probably have multiple teams working, and you got multiple talented teams working here. In addition to the Key Game guys, which did Indy 4 2 months ago. But yeah, it's a really good one, really unique, and I really like the theming of it. It gives everything a little bit more fun and life to it, I think. So
yeah,
even just like the little gun out the car window, I'm like, oh, that robber's like, he's sticking the gun out the window, he's like being all badass about it. So
they said they could have easily just had like bullets materializing from the side of a car.
Right. Yeah. So, and it was cool that they added gameplay elements to it too, because you could aim and stuff. Like shooting off the walls, I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
right. Yeah, it's one of those force field highways that you're on, New cop technology.
Yeah, it was cool though. I enjoyed it a lot. So overall, gave it 3.75 out of 10. It's a very solid game. Gave it 3 quarters.
That's a
3
high
3 quarters out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like, by the way, the last couple of Atari games have all been like around this level of good, which is all higher than any other people right now. So it's like, I feel like they're back on top, honestly.
Yeah, they're living up to the reason that we know their name so well.
Yeah. Yeah, and where's Taitopin? What are they doing?
I don't know, man.
All right, should we get into the last game that we rated today, Chris?
Sure.
Go for it.
So again, another Atari from July of 76. This is Flyball. So this is a baseball game, similar to Baseball by Ramtech, but definitely some differences that I'll get into as I go through my discussion and my ratings. So basically, this is a pretty simplified, kind of dumbed down, almost like a home run derby sort of version of baseball. One player controls the pitcher, one player controls the batter. There are no fielders on the screen other than the pitcher. So you just have the 2 kind of sprites. 1 coin would get you a game for 2 people, so it was pretty decent value, I guess. Although the flyer lets you know that you could make it cost 25 cents or 50 cents, depending on how much you wanted to rip people off. It was a black and white display. Very simple. Again, it's just a baseball diamond. There's not really an outfield. It's just kind of, there are kind of outfield boundary lines, which was interesting, but it's just kind of the diamond and the boundaries. The sprites look all right. The bat is like a decent bat, and the batter and the pitcher kind of are very easily discernible in terms of what they're supposed to be. There's on-screen scoring in terms of runs, but also in terms of strikes and balls, outs, what inning it is. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool.
And easy to follow. So that was one distinction between the Baseball by Ramtech, where I thought that the on-screen scoring was not very helpful. Mm-hmm. It was there and it counted runs, but there weren't really labels in the Baseball by Ramtech's scoring. So this was a lot simpler displayed. In terms of gameplay, the gameplay is pretty dumbed down for a baseball game. You pretty much had either an infield ground ball or a home run. So as the batter, when you hit the ball, if the pitcher managed to get to the ball, then it was like basically a ground ball, right? It wasn't caught in the air for an out. So he would field the ball, and then like the ball was in play, so he could attempt to tag you out. But if the pitcher didn't catch the ball, it pretty much went for a home run. So again, kind of like almost a home run derby in a way. As the pitcher, the role was basically pull back and then forward to release the pitch. You could kind of put that English on the pitch, which kind of seemed unfair to me. I don't know how you would possibly hit the ball as the batter.
Right.
as it's just moving in midair as it comes toward you. And it's really just up and down to release. And then once the batter hits the ball into play, as the pitcher, you are every fielder. So you try to sprint to the ball. And once you get the ball, you try to sprint to tag the batter out as he's running to first base or whatever it might be. So the pitcher in this game is the fastest person in the world. They can field the ball on the opposite side of the field and still beat the batter.
Till first?
It seems, yeah.
Wow.
But getting to the ball is difficult, so I think that was really the challenge. The pitching was kind of weird to me. It counted balls and strikes. For the life of me, I don't know how you throw a ball. I watched somebody else play this, and they were trying to walk somebody, just throw 4 balls, and every single pitch they threw, no matter how far off the plate it was, came back as a strike. And then later on, when he was trying to just pitch normally, he threw a ball. So I don't know what the distinction was, but apparently you could throw a ball. There is advertising on the flyer for this that talks about all of the different sort of things you can do in this. It says more realistic play and tactics, bunts, balls, and strikes. Again, I have no idea how you do any of those things. Not sure how you could bunt or why you would bunt, considering that the alternative was basically a bunt or a home run. There was no reason to intentionally bunt.
Right.
And I don't know, again, how it discerned balls and strikes, but it did apparently. There was an interesting glitch in the game, which I couldn't trigger, but the guy I was watching on YouTube was trying to trigger, which was that if there is a runner on second or third base, so if you had a runner on second base, right, and first base was open, and you walked the hitter, all runners would advance. So that's obviously not how it works in baseball, right? But if you had a guy on second base and you walked the hitter, the guy on second base would go to third base.
Right. So you would just get a run if somebody was on third and you walked somebody to first?
Yeah, I think so. So I couldn't make this happen, and neither could the guy I was watching, but that was my assumption, was if there was a runner on third and you walked the batter, then it was a run. So It was kind of weird in that way. But again, the one thing I didn't mention, I guess, yet was that the developers for this apparently were not in any way familiar with the rules of baseball.
Nice.
Classic.
So they kind of admitted that. There was kind of an interview excerpt that I read with them where they were like, yeah, we didn't know anything about baseball. So there's a lot of kind of funny ins and outs of the game that were just because we didn't really know how the game works, which I thought was funny. So overall, I thought this game was pretty fun. I mean, part of it's probably that I like sports games, but I thought it was enjoyable in kind of that home run derby sense, which I think is good in an arcade setting to have a simple game.
Yeah.
But overall, it's pretty glitchy. There was one time the guy on YouTube, it didn't happen to me, but his pitcher just got kind of frozen off screen. And so the guy hit a ground ball, the pitcher got frozen, and the batter just kept running around the bases, and he couldn't do anything to get him out. It was kind of weird to play as both the pitcher and the hitter, but I could see this being a lot of fun. And they talked about how this was a big kind of game in bars, which I could definitely see playing against your friend, it being a good time. Overall, I gave the gameplay a 4 out of 10. I thought it was just kind of simple and entertaining. And I thought that the mechanics of it made it so that you could kind of get the hang of it. The hitting was kind of weird. You just pulled the bat back and then pushed it forward, but you also didn't actually have to push the bat back and forward. You could just swing forward. So it was, back on the arrow key and then up on the arrow key. But you could also just hit up on the arrow key and your guy would swing. And I actually found that to be easier. And I couldn't figure out if there was an advantage to kind of cocking the bat back. It didn't seem any more likely to hit the ball further. Again, it was just kind of an automatic home run if the pitcher didn't get it anyway.
Could you aim with the bat? If it was slightly forward, did it go to the left then? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, maybe that was a factor, but I didn't notice that if it is.
Mm-hmm.
It was more to me just that if I pulled the bat back, it was harder for me to then time hitting the pitch than just kind of pushing forward when the pitch was coming in.
Right.
But overall, I thought that it was pretty fun in that way. The gameplay was very simple, though. So this was kind of a ding to it for me, which was watching Tornado Baseball, which comes out in 1976 as well. First off, better name. But second, the game was much more complicated and realistic in a sense, right? There was actually a team of fielders in the outfield and in the infield at the correct kind of positions that you would have them on a baseball field. But additionally to that, the hitting was more complicated. You could hit a foul ball, you could hit a double, a triple, and it would pop up on the screen and like tell you what you were hitting. So there were more advanced elements, but also it seemed like there were kind of trade-offs because it was kind of dumbed down as well. Like what I liked about Flyball is that you had a hitter who truly like was standing there with a bat, and you could really like live through the fact that you could imagine yourself, all right, now I'm going to pull the bat back, now I'm going to swing. Mm-hmm. In the tornado baseball, it's just kind of a stick. It doesn't even look like a bat, and there's no hitter. So it was better in that way for gameplay, but probably not as true to like true baseball.
Right.
The graphics, I gave a 3 out of 10. I thought that it was pretty simple, but again, I liked the pitcher being very distinguishable. I liked the hitter being very distinguishable with the bat. I liked the on-screen displays of how many runs each team had, how many outs, how many strikes, how many balls.
Was there like animation for these guys, or did they move their arms or anything? As they ran or something?
That's a good question. I don't remember how they were running the bases, but the pitcher like very much visibly pulled his arm back and threw the ball forward.
Okay.
And the batter kind of did the same as he was swinging.
Cool.
I think there was probably actually like kind of a running animation to it as I'm imagining it. I think it was.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I'm watching. Yeah. I'm watching this guy. He's moving the bat.
Yeah.
We're doing it live.
Doing it live. Yeah, he just threw like a weighted ball to the right and it's a strike.
Yeah.
Totally out of the batter's reach.
And there was a story about this game causing like a big bar fight because of the rule I mentioned earlier about how runners would advance on a walk,
mm-hmm.
even if they weren't behind kind of the batter, which I thought was pretty funny. It talked about like the historical story was that like 2 guys got in a fist fight in a bar because one guy walked somebody and his runners advanced, which obviously shouldn't have happened.
Right.
And it just kind of reminded me, like, when I was watching the pitching, people must have been furious with this game as, like, everything is being called a strike.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it now, and it looks like there is animation, but it's only when their guys are moving horizontal, and then vertical, you just get kind of a front view of them, and they don't really move, which is kind of interesting.
What I recall. So running to first base, right, there was kind of an animation.
Yeah.
And then to second, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, so I said 3 out of 10 for graphics. It was simple, but I thought that it was done well. And it was a nicer display than like Tornado Baseball, which looked, I guess, just older. Like it had a more defined outfield and everything, but the sprites were kind of like pixelated and in a way that they weren't so much in Flyball.
Right.
In terms of sound, I didn't have any sound in the emulator, so NA there, but in similar games, it seemed like there was kind of simplistic baseball sounds. In terms of relevance, I only gave it a 2 out of 10 because I can't imagine this was any more relevant than any other baseball game. Particularly, I think the gameplay here was better, but I think that Tornado Baseball or like a similar game where there's actually fielders was probably more relevant to the future of a game than this was. Although now when you watch baseball on TV and when you play like a modern baseball game, you have all of those balls and strike counts, outs, inning, score on your screen. So like this was definitely truer in that regard and probably carried forward in that way. And then overall I said it was a 4 out of 10. I probably had it like, it's probably truly like a 3 out of 5 maybe I would say. Between a 4 on gameplay, 3 on graphics, 2 on relevance. So probably a 3.5 out of 10. I know that averages do a 3, but I think I would bump it to kind of a little bit better than that because I think it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of like replay value in it, even though it's simple. I think it's one of those games that isn't simple in a boring way. It's simple in like an easy to follow way.
Right. Yeah, for a lot of these early sports adaptations to video games, I feel like simplicity is really the way to make it fun. Like, I mean, when you go back to the Odyssey versions of football, it was literally like 2 squares on a screen, but then like a gigantic rule book for how to be able to play this.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I like that this is just like, sure, it might not be incredibly accurate, but it's like, okay, I jump in and play. I know what I'm doing. Like,
yeah, and I really like arcade style sports games. So one thing that I actually will look forward to you guys covering, if you've ever played it or seen it, is NBA Jam. Which is like one of the more famous sports games, right? And this is just like 2 players on each team, very cartoonish, like street ball style, right? But like it's fun. It's so much fun in the way that it's simple.
Yeah,
and I liked that. I think in this Flyball game as well, it was just basic. There wasn't really any frills to the gameplay, which I liked a lot.
Very cool.
Also, I would mention I liked the cabinet. It was kind of a lime green, white and black, but like there was actually some pretty cool art on it of baseball players doing various baseball things.
Doing all their baseball things, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought like if I saw this today in an arcade, it wouldn't look outdated just from like the box. I thought the box looked nice. The artwork looked nice.
Oh, good. Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got some good ones. That's what I'm saying. Like Atari, they just like can make like decent games. Like they don't make anything bad. If you get an Atari game, it's like, okay, this is going to be pretty good.
They definitely seem to have the quality in their developing and like consistency in their development, which I'm sure, like you were saying, Wes, is why they are the name we know.
Right. Yeah. And also just they really seem to, where some might like have this great idea, Atari seems to say, understand, okay, this is what makes the game fun though.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if the way they implement it, they usually get the core of what makes it fun, it seems.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
So let's move on to our last two honorable mentions, which are also baseball themed. First up, we have Ballpark by Taito, which came out sometime in '76. This one's a baseball game that we don't have much info on, but it looks like it could be a Japanese release of Tornado Baseball, which Ben's going to talk about next.
Yeah, Tornado Baseball. I wanted to talk about this one because this is actually the game I played in lieu of Baseball by Ramtech when I covered it so long ago, and I was like, this seems really, really good for the time.
Right, yeah.
But the thing is, like, I couldn't find any evidence that said this was an upgraded version in any way. Everything I was reading was like, this is a clone of Baseball by Ramtech, and I'm like, well, I guess it's the same thing then,
Right.
Anyway, this whole baseball series, I feel like it's one of the biggest, like, historians need to go back and like figure out what's going on with these Baseball by Ramtech clones, but this is like kind of the last one, so I'm like glad to be done this part of history, because I think the whole thing's kind of just like nobody knows what really happened.
Right. A lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, as Chris was saying, you have the whole fielders. I explained it back when I covered Baseball by Ramtech, but it's a pretty decent version of baseball. But I'm kind of glad that we're past this now. So we didn't need to cover this one because this is what I basically covered way back then. So
right.
Yeah, just left it as an honorable mention. That one was by Midway and it came out July of '76. So, and that'll do it for us today.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us and listening to this special episode with Chris as a guest. Chris, I hope that when this comes out, you get to listen to yourself talk and either be proud or cringe, depending on what you're feeling.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear myself. Hey, question for you guys, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think the answer is yes, but Midway is the same like Midway developer of like NFL Blitz. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's see.
I'm pretty sure it's the same so? Midway as the Midway that is still making like arcade stuff now.
Mm-hmm. And that's pretty cool. They stuck around. I mean, Atari still exists, I guess, right? But
yeah, they don't really do anything new though.
Yeah, Midway almost seems the most relevant of any of the companies so far.
Yeah, as far as like
day.
Names that are still around, and that's as far as I know. We might have to do a little more research to verify, but I'm pretty sure. And
they
also,
are one of the bigger names, like even back now. I feel like they've come out with quite a few like kind of pretty decent ones.
Yeah, I think part of that's
originals.
because there might have been a bigger industry at the time in Japan when they kind of got set up. Because I'm pretty sure Midway was a Japanese company, but
I've got no clue.
Okay,
we can find out. We can make it a special topic sometime.
Yeah, maybe we'll go into their history now that so we're not just making stuff up now that Chris brought it up. So look forward to that when we actually know what we're talking about.
Yeah. All right, cool.
But for now, I mean, make sure to send us a tweet, send us an email if you have any questions or anything you want us to talk about in a special topic, and check out our website because we got a ton of good stuff up there about the timeline and reviews of all of our ratings.
Oh, yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's special episode, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, Chris, take us out.
What do I do to do that?
You just did it. We'll see you guys in the next one.
All right, see you next time.